Darkness pressed in from every side, thick and suffocating, broken only by the sound of her breathing, ragged, uneven, tearing at her throat like it might rip free. Her boots slammed against frozen ground as she ran, branches clawing at her skin, thorns snagging her coat, the forest refusing to let her pass without taking something in return. Pain flared sharp in her side. Warm blood soaked through her sleeve, already stiffening in the cold, but she didn't slow. She couldn't. Stopping meant dying. The storm howled around her, snow cutting sideways like shards of glass. The wind screamed through the trees, bending them low, as if the forest itself was bowing to something cruel and ancient. Every breath burned her lungs. Every step felt heavier than the last. Fear sat deep in her chest, heavy and relentless, and not loud but steady, like a countdown she couldn't escape. She wasn't alone out here. She felt them, not just behind her, but everywhere. Watching, tracking. Wolves, yes, but wrong somehow. Their presence slid under her skin, cold and knowing. Predators that didn't rush. Predators that waited. Her pulse spiked, and with it came the heat. It always came with fear. A strange, unnatural heat that bloomed beneath her ribs and spread through her veins like fire trapped under ice. She pressed a shaking hand to her chest, trying to force it down, trying to stay small, stay hidden. Her foot caught on a buried root. She went down hard, breath knocked from her lungs as the world spun. Snow filled her mouth. Panic surged, and then, light, silver, bright and sudden, it flared from her palm in a sharp burst, lighting the storm for half a heartbeat. The forest seemed to recoil. Her own gasp caught as the light vanished as fast as it came, leaving her staring at her trembling hand, horror and shame twisting together inside her chest. Not now. Please, not now. She dragged herself up, heart hammering, knowing she'd just given herself away. And if you can feel your pulse quicken right now, if you're drawn to stories where danger chases destiny, where love waits in the dark and the moon never lies, then stay with her. Subscribe to Wild Moon Narratives, because here, the night always has something to say. She ran again, deeper into the storm, carrying a secret that burned brighter with every step, unaware that the chaos behind her was only the beginning. She burst through the last line of trees and nearly collided with him. The storm didn't touch him the way it touched everything else, and snow fell around his broad frame but didn't cling. Wind screamed past, yet he stood unmoved, solid as the mountains buried beneath the ice. A massive shadow carved out of night and muscle, blocking her path like fate stepping into her way without asking permission. She skidded to a stop, breath tearing from her chest, every instinct screaming to turn and run, but she couldn't, not when his eyes found hers. Gold, not the soft gold of candlelight or warmth, but the sharp, molten kind, bright enough to cut through the storm. They locked onto her face, searching, assessing. Then something shifted, just slightly. The edge dulled, the intensity softened, as if recognition had reached him before understanding. Her knees almost gave out. He said her name, not loudly, not like a challenge. He spoke it low, steady, as if he'd carried it with him for a long time, as if it belonged in his mouth. The sound of it landed in her chest and stayed there, heavy and unreal. She'd never told anyone out here who she was, never. Yet he said it like a truth that didn't need explaining. Before she could speak, before fear could turn into panic, shapes emerged from the storm. Wolves. Big. Silent. Their eyes burned in the dark as they closed in, a living ring of muscle and hunger. Her pulse roared in her ears. This was it. This was how it ended. Then the man lifted one hand. That was all. The wolves froze. Every single one of them. Heads dipped, bodies lowered. Obedience rippled through them like a held breath finally released. They weren't circling her. They were protecting him. He stepped forward, and placing himself between her and the wolves behind her, without touching her, without even looking back. The message was clear anyway. Untouchable. Off limits. His presence alone felt like a wall, solid, dangerous, and strangely safe. "You shouldn't be here," he said. His voice was rough, like it had been scraped raw by too many orders given and too many losses carried. Not cruel, not kind, just honest, controlled. As if holding back something that wanted out just as badly as the fire inside her. She should have been terrified. She was. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. A pull she didn't understand. A tension that wrapped tight around her ribs and refused to let go. Her body leaned toward him even as her mind screamed to retreat. She looked up at him, shaking, wounded, unhunted, and standing in the shadow of a man who felt like both shelter and storm. And somewhere deep inside, where instinct lived before reason, she knew this wasn't a rescue. This was the moment everything changed. The silence between them cracked something open inside her. The storm faded into a dull roar as her mind slipped backward, dragged by a memory she'd spent years burying. She was 12 again, barefoot on sacred ground, the moon full and waiting. The pack stood in a wide circle, faces lit with anticipation. That night was supposed to change everything. Her first shift, her becoming. She remembered the heat building under her skin back then, the same heat she felt now, only she hadn't known to fear it yet. Bones were supposed to stretch. Fur was supposed to break through skin. That was the story she'd been told her whole life. But when the moon reached its peak, nothing went the way it should have. There was no fur. There was fire. Silver and blinding, it tore out of her chest in a violent rush, wrapping her arms, her throat, her spine. She screamed as the ground scorched beneath her feet. Wolves stumbled back. Mothers grabbed their children. The elders rose as one, horror sharp on their faces. She remembered the words even now, whispered like a curse that might spread if spoken too loudly. Abomination, unnatural, dangerous. They didn't touch her. They didn't try to help. They just decided. Right there, before the bond ceremony, before she could even understand what she'd done wrong, she was cast out. No howl of farewell, no mate mark, just exile under a moon that suddenly felt cold and distant. She learned to survive alone after that, and learned how to press the fire down, layer by layer, until it stayed buried. I learned how to swallow pain without making a sound, learned that hope was a liability. The present snapped back into place when the man in front of her crouched and set a canteen on a flat stone between them. Slow, careful, like she might bolt if he moved wrong. Her body reacted before her mind could stop it. She flinched, hard, her shoulders tensed, breath catching, fire flaring hot and sharp beneath her skin. She waited for the disgust, the fear, the command to leave. It didn't come. He didn't reach for her, didn't step closer. He just waited. I really waited. The wolves behind him stayed still, their attention fixed on her, but not hungry, watchful, respectful. She'd never been looked at like that before. Not as a threat, not as a mistake, just present. When she finally met his gaze again, there was no judgment in it, no calculation, only focus. As if her words, if she chose to speak, would matter. The fire inside her stirred, then eased, not gone, never gone, but quieter, like it had found something solid to lean against. For the first time in years, her pulse slowed without force. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was about to shatter under the weight of herself. And that terrified her more than the chase ever had. He led her away from the open storm and deeper into the forest, not by command, but by presence. She followed without fully understanding why, her body aching, her mind raw, the fire inside her, restless but restrained. The trees grew older the farther they went, thicker trunks, roots knotted together like ribs beneath the earth. The air changed, heavier, charged, as if the land itself was holding its breath. They stopped where the ground dipped into a hollow wrapped in stone and bone. An ancient moon shrine, long abandoned by time but not forgotten. Weathered pillars leaned inward, carved with symbols worn soft by centuries of wind and prayer. Animal skulls lay half-buried at the edges, their empty sockets turned toward the sky. Roots had broken through the stone floor, gripping it tight, claiming it as their own. She felt it before she stepped inside. The fire stirred, sharp and insistent, rising up her spine like it recognized this place. Her pulse quickened. Every instinct warned her to stay back. Sacred places had never been safe for her. But something deeper pulled her forward, quiet and undeniable. The moment her boot crossed into the circle, the shrine answered, and symbols flared to life beneath her feet, lines of pale light threading through the stone. The air vibrated, low and humming, like a distant heartbeat. She froze, breath caught in her throat, fear and awe tangling together until she couldn't tell them apart. The Alpha went still, not tense, not defensive, just struck. His eyes tracked the light, then lifted to her wrist as if he already knew where to look. She followed his gaze just as heat bloomed there, searing but not painful. Silver flame crept across her skin, slow and deliberate, shaping itself into a mark she'd never seen before, but somehow recognized. A sigil. Old, purposeful. A voice echoed in her mind, brittle with age and certainty. An elder's voice she hadn't heard since the night she was cast out. The one with the mark will bring the moon to its knees. The world fractured around her. She saw wolves bowing, their heads lowered in reverence and fear. She saw moons bleeding light across blackened skies. She felt power surge through her, not wild, not chaotic, but vast. Waiting. The weight of it nearly drove her to her knees. Her hands shook as she stared at the mark burning softly against her skin. Her voice barely carried when she spoke, stripped bare of defense or pride. They were right to fear me. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he stepped closer, not into her space, but into her truth. His voice was quiet, steady, and unafraid. All wrong to cast you out. The fire inside her flared again, but this time it didn't feel like it wanted to destroy. The first drumbeat rolled through the shrine like a warning carved into sound, no low, distant, heavy enough to vibrate through bone and stone alike. Her head snapped up. The fire inside her recoiled, then surged, restless and sharp. She knew that rhythm. Every wolf did. A summoning, a challenge. The forest answered it in uneasy echoes as shapes began to move beyond the trees, shadows separating themselves from shadow. Another pack was coming. The Alpha beside her shifted his stance, subtle but unmistakable. The air changed with him, tighter, charged, the calm edge of a blade drawn halfway from its sheath. Wolves emerged from the dark in numbers she couldn't count, their eyes catching moonlight, their formation disciplined and deliberate. At their center walked a rival Alpha, his presence loud, aggressive, demanding attention simply by existing. His gaze locked on her at once. The whisper started before he even spoke. And witch, curse-bearer, moonblight, each word landed like a stone thrown at bare skin. She felt them press into her chest, familiar and crushing. The circle of wolves widened, not in welcome, but in distance. Space made for fear. The rival Alpha raised his voice, sharp and carrying. He named her an abomination, a destabilizer, a threat to every pack bound by moon and blood. He demanded she be surrendered, here, now, before the land itself paid the price for sheltering her. She didn't look at him. She looked at the Alpha beside her. This was the moment. She felt it with brutal clarity. This was where stories like hers always broke. The council elders stepped forward, faces carved from caution and old loyalty. Their words were measured, but the message was not, choose your people. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Her chest tightened. The fire curled inward, defensive, wounded. She took a step back, already calculating paths through the trees, already bracing for the cold bite of abandonment. Running was muscle memory, leaving before she was forced to hurt less than being told to go. He didn't speak, not right away. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the surrounding wolves, to the elders, to the weight of a leadership he hadn't asked for, but carried anyway. It was only a moment, a breath, a pause no one else might have noticed. She did. That hesitation cut deeper than any blade. She stepped back again, then turned before she could see the decision finish forming on his face. Snow swallowed her footprints as she ran, the storm closing around her like an old habit. She didn't wait to hear her name called, didn't wait to be chosen or unchosen. By the time he moved, she was already gone, taking the fire, the prophecy, and a fracture that would not heal cleanly with her into the dark. She thought she'd lost him. The cave was hidden deep within a split ridge, its mouth narrow and jagged, breathing out warmth that fogged the frozen air. Lava veins pulsed far beneath the stone, turning the walls faintly red, like a living heart buried underground. She curled near the back, knees drawn tight, cloak discarded, blood dark against her sleeve. The heat kept her alive. It also kept her trapped with her thoughts. The fire inside her raged unchecked now, stirred by fear and shame, and that single moment of hesitation she couldn't stop replaying. She pressed her forehead to the stone and tried to slow her breathing. Tried to quiet the surge before it burned its way out, and her footsteps echoed at the cave entrance. Her body tensed instantly, muscles coiling, power flaring hot and sharp. She turned, ready to fight or flee, but the scent hit her first. Pine, ash, moon-warmed fur. Him. He stopped a few paces away, letting the silence stretch. No accusations, no commands, just presence. When he finally knelt, it was slow, deliberate, as if he were approaching something sacred rather than something dangerous. "You're bleeding," he said. She laughed once, short and bitter. "That's usually what happens when people like me run." He didn't answer. He reached for her arm, paused just short of touching, and waited. When she didn't pull away, his fingers closed gently around her wrist. His touch was warm, steady. He cleaned the wound with careful hands, as if every drop of blood mattered, as if she mattered, and firelight flickered between them, painting shadows across his face. The weight he carried showed there, in the lines at his mouth, the restraint in his eyes. He spoke without looking up. "My rule cost me my mate," he said, "and everything soft I had left." The words settled heavy in the space between them, not an excuse, a truth. Her throat tightened. She swallowed, then gave him one of her own. "The fire isn't just power," she said quietly. "It feeds on what I feel. Fear makes it wild. Anger makes it cruel. Love," her voice faltered, "love could burn the world." He looked up then, really looked at her. They leaned closer without deciding to, breaths tangling, heat rising between them that had nothing to do with the cave. The pull was undeniable, dangerous in its intensity. For one heartbeat, one reckless moment, and they almost closed the distance. They stopped, not from lack of want, but from knowing the cost. He rested his forehead lightly against hers, voice low and certain. "I see you," he murmured, "all of you." And for the first time she believed it. The moon trial was meant to be neutral ground. Stone pillars ringed the clearing, white with age, their surfaces carved with laws older than memory. Wolves gathered in silence, rank and history woven into where they stood. She felt it the moment she stepped into the circle, eyes on her from every side, measuring, weighing, already deciding. The alpha stood close enough that she could feel the heat of him, but not close enough to shield her from what this place demanded. The elder she trusted was the one who spoke. His voice carried easily, calm and practiced. The same voice that once told her stories of the first packs, of balance and restraint. Now it cut. He named her bloodline. He named the mark. He named the fire. Each word peeled away another layer of protection she didn't know she still had. Gasps rippled through the circle. She shook her head, a quiet plea, but it was already done. The elder raised his staff and spoke the ritual words that forced truth into flesh. Pain exploded through her wrist as the sigil ignited, silver flame tearing free of its restraints. She cried out, falling to her knees as power surged through her veins, raw and violent, dragged into the open for all of them to see. "This," the elder declared, "is proof." The prophecy followed, twisted, sharp and cruel. Not a warning, a verdict. "She will end us all." Fear turned fast. Wolves backed away. All snarls replaced murmurs. The circle tightened, not in unity, but in threat. She looked up, desperate now, searching for a single familiar face, willing to see her as more than the fire consuming her skin. The Alpha stepped forward. Relief hit her so hard it almost broke her. He opened his mouth. Chain slammed into the ground. The council moved as one, binding him in silver restraints that burned on contact. Power snapped around him, ancient and unyielding, forcing him to his knees. His roar shook the clearing, fury and denial tearing free at once. "No," she breathed. "Don't." He strained against the bindings, eyes locked on her, helpless in a way she had never seen him before. The pack watched. No one intervened. Something inside her shattered. The fire answered. Silver light erupted from her chest, blinding, screaming its way into the sky. The ground split. The stone cracked. Wolves scattered in panic as the force of it threw them back. Her scream ripped free, raw and uncontained, carrying years of exile, shame, and hope crushed in a single breath. Then, the light folded inward. When the smoke cleared, the circle was empty. Only scorched stone remained, and the echo of a power the world had just pushed too far. The ground screamed before anyone did. Stone pillars split down their centers as something vast and wrong tore its way into the ritual site. Shadows peeled themselves off the trees, rising into shapes that should not have existed. Beasts made of hunger and void, their forms bending like smoke given teeth. They moved fast, too fast. Wolves barely had time to shift before claws cut them down, their howls snapping short, swallowed by chaos. Panic scattered the pack. The council's control shattered in seconds. Silver bindings cracked under the Alpha's strength as rage surged through him, old and absolute. He tore free with a roar that shook the clearing, but the sound came too late. Blood stained the stones. Fear ruled the air, and she was nowhere. Then the moon broke through the clouds. Light poured down in a single blinding column, silver-white and alive. The shadows recoiled, hissing as the temperature dropped and the world seemed to tilt towards something ancient awakening. The Alpha lifted his head slowly, breath caught in his chest. She stepped out of the light, not wounded, not hunted, not afraid. She stood tall at the heart of the clearing, her feet bare against cracked stone, silver flame rising around her like a living crown. It did not burn her. It answered her. The mark on her wrist blazed, lines unfolding, completing themselves as if they had always been waiting for this moment. When she spoke, it was not just her voice. It carried others, ancestors long turned to dust, mothers and warriors and forgotten queens. Their power rolled through her words, deep and resonant, shaking the air itself. "I am not your sacrifice." The earth responded. Roots burst from the ground, thick and relentless, wrapping around shadow beasts and crushing them back into nothing. The stone beneath her feet pulsed, ancient runes igniting in answer to her presence. Wolves stared in stunned silence as the land chose her, openly, irrevocably. The Alpha pushed through the chaos toward her, disbelief and awe tearing through him in equal measure. This was no curse, no mistake. This balance was reclaimed. The shadows began to retreat, but not before something else stirred behind them. A presence colder than fear, older than prophecy. The true enemy shifted within the dark, watching her with interest instead of hatred. She lifted her chin, fire roaring brighter, unflinching. For the first time, the world was not bracing for her destruction. It was bracing for her command. Silence followed the last echo of battle, heavy and uncertain. Ash drifted through the air like dark snow, settling over broken stone and wounded wolves who stared at her as if seeing the moon for the first time. She stood at the center of it all, silver flame still breathing around her shoulders, power humming beneath her skin. Steady now, claimed, not wild, not begging for permission. She felt every eye on her, and every unspoken question trembling in the space between heartbeats. This was the edge of everything. One step in the wrong direction, and the world would burn. One act of mercy, one act of wrath, and history would remember her name forever, either as a savior or a monster. The weight of it pressed into her spine, heavy but no longer unbearable. She had carried worse alone. The Alpha moved to her side, bloodied but unbroken. He did not touch her. He did not speak. His presence was a question he was willing to live with the answer to. Around them, the pack hesitated, torn between instinct and fear, between what they had been taught and what they had just witnessed with their own eyes. She could feel it, the choice humming through the ground, through bone, through breath itself. Destruction waited if she let the fire loose, and salvation waited if she held it steady. And for the first time, the decision was hers alone. Her gaze swept across the clearing, across faces twisted with regret, awe, terror, and hope. She saw herself reflected there, not the exile, not the curse, but something unfinished. Something is coming. Would they ever fully trust her? Would love survive the fear she inspired? The question lingered, soft but sharp, slipping into the quiet like a held breath. Would you have chosen her, or feared her too? Because this is how legends are born, not in certainty, but in moments like this, when the heart has to decide before the mind feels safe enough to follow. And if this story lit something inside you, if you felt the fire, the ache, the pull of a destiny that refuses to stay quiet, then stay with us. The ash drifted slowly, unsettling like whispered apologies, over the broken stones and scorched earth. The forest seemed to hold its breath, trees rigid and still, leaves trembling faintly, as if unsure whether to mourn or to bow in awe. Even the shadows hesitated at the edges, reluctant to retreat fully, reluctant to vanish completely. Silence stretched over the clearing, thick and heavy, pressing against her skin like the weight of every decision she had ever made. The Alpha stepped closer, careful now, measured, his boots stirring the ash beneath him. He stopped a breath away, hesitating, the firelight catching the raw edges of his face, the jaw clenched too tight, eyes soft but cautious, the weight of regret and admiration tangled together. His hand hovered, uncertain, suspended in that fragile moment between trust and fear, before finally reaching for hers. Their fingers brushed, tentative, electric. It was a connection charged with unspoken promises, the kind that could shatter as easily as it could heal. She met his gaze, breathing steady but deep, still feeling the echoes of the fire that had nearly consumed her. She wanted to speak, to reassure, to claim something tangible in the wake of destruction, but even her voice felt small, swallowed by the enormity of what had happened, by the storm of power still thrumming beneath her skin. She realized then that survival was no longer about running, hiding, or enduring. It was about standing, about accepting the weight of what she was and what she could become. Deep beneath the earth, something moved. The stone trembled faintly, subtle at first, then with a pulse that resonated in her chest. A voice, rough, older than memory, whispered from the darkness between roots and bone, low and unmistakable. She is not the only one. The moon overhead flickered, shadows twisting unnaturally, light dancing across silvered fur, ancient symbols, and broken stone. The air seemed alive, tense with anticipation, as though the world itself was leaning forward, waiting. She tightened her fingers around the alphas, standing taller, flame still coiling lightly around her form, but now controlled, possessed, purposeful. She wasn't running anymore. She was ready. And yet, she knew this was only the beginning. The forest exhaled, the shadows whispered, and the screen cut to black. In the aftermath of fire and shadow, she stood at the center of the ruined clearing, her silver flame calm now, a quiet crown of power and purpose. The world had tried to define her, abomination, curse, and sacrifice, but she had claimed herself instead. Every fear she had carried, every moment of exile and doubt had led to this. A girl no longer running, a shifter no longer hiding. Beside her, the Alpha, her anchor in a storm of chaos, reached for her hand, tentative but unwavering. In his eyes, she saw not just admiration or desire, but recognition. He understood her struggle, her pain, and her strength. Together, they were no longer prey or outcasts. They were a force that could reshape the packs, the prophecy, the world itself. Yet, even as ash settled and shadows recoiled, the earth beneath them whispered of dangers still unseen. Somewhere deep beneath stone and root, something waited, patient and ancient, its power rivaling even hers. And in the flickering moonlight, the unspoken truth hung in the air. She was not alone in her destiny. And others would rise, others would challenge, and the balance of the world would demand more than courage. It would demand every ounce of fire, heart, and will she could summon. She inhaled, feeling her power, her purpose, and her freedom. She was no longer a sacrifice. She was the storm, the fire, the prophecy walking among the living. And while this battle was won, the war was far from over. The story was only beginning.